Episode 15, The Savoy Protocol. Part 1. The letter arrived without a stamp. Detective Inspector Alistair Finch found it waiting on his desk when he returned from an early morning call in Stepney, a single envelope, cream paper, unmarked except for his name written in a careful, upright hand. Not hurried. Not ornamental. The handwriting of someone who understood that neatness could be more intimidating than flourish. No postmark. No crease from sorting machinery. Hand-delivered. Finch did not open it immediately. He hung his coat on the back of the chair, poured what remained of yesterday's tea into the sink, and set a kettle to boil before finally picking the envelope up again. It felt heavier than it should. Inside was a single sheet of thick paper. No greeting. No signature. Just one line. Savoy Hotel, Thames 4A, 1:15 p.m. Order the Cantaloupe. Finch stared at it for a long time. From his pocket, he took the small jade fragment Lau had given him, cool, smooth, deceptively simple. He turned it between his fingers, feeling the faint ridges of the carved symbols. Someone's paying attention, he muttered. Because whoever had sent the note knew two things. First, that Finch possessed something connected to the jade ledger. Second, that he would understand the invitation was not social. He folded the paper carefully and slipped it inside his notebook. The lobby of the Savoy Hotel was a cathedral to wealth. Marble floors polished to a mirror sheen. Brass fittings gleaming as if freshly minted. Chandeliers suspended like frozen constellations above the slow choreography of bellhops, reception staff, and guests moving with the quiet confidence of people accustomed to being accommodated. Finch paused just inside the revolving doors, suddenly aware of how out of place he looked. His trench coat was dry but worn, it seemed softened by years of rain and smoke. His shoes had seen too many pavements and not enough polish. Nobody stopped him. Nobody ever did. A maître d' approached with the kind of smile that managed to be both welcoming and faintly apologetic. "Good afternoon, sir. May I assist you?" "Lunch," Finch said. "Thames 4A." "Of course." No question about reservations. No request for credentials. The Savoy had long ago learned that wealth did not always announce itself loudly, and that some of its most important guests preferred discretion over display. Finch was guided through corridors that seemed designed not merely to impress but to reassure, thick carpets muffling sound, walls adorned with paintings that suggested permanence, stability, the comforting illusion that the world beyond these walls could never intrude. The Thames 4A opened before him in a flood of pale light. Glass ceilings arched overhead. White columns rose like polished bone. Tables draped in linen stood precisely spaced, each one a small island of civility. The river beyond the windows moved slow and brown, indifferent to human elegance. Soft piano music drifted through the air. Finch felt, absurdly, as though he had wandered into a stage set where everyone else had been given a script. "Table for one, Inspector Finch." He blinked. The maître d' gestured toward a small table near the window, not hidden, not central. Visible, but not conspicuous. Someone had arranged this. Finch Saturday. A waiter appeared almost instantly, placing a menu before him with ritual precision. "May I recommend our signature luncheon dish, sir?" the man asked politely. Seafood salad served in a Cantaloupe Half. Finch almost smiled. "Yes," he said. "You may." "And something to drink?" "Water." "No wine." "No theatrics." The waiter inclined his head and withdrew. Finch rested his hands on the table, resisting the urge to check the room too obviously. Instead, he let his gaze drift naturally, a technique learned over years of surveillance work. At the table behind him, two businessmen discussed shipping contracts in low, urgent voices. Near the piano, an older couple ate in companionable silence, their movements slow and synchronized. A trio of tourists consulted a guidebook, whispering as though afraid to disturb the room's equilibrium. Nothing unusual. Which meant everything. Because whoever had summoned him would not announce themselves. Not here. Not like this. A small silver stand held a place card at the edge of his table. It bore no name. Only a tiny jade-colored dot in one corner. Finch's pulse slowed, sharpened. He reached into his pocket and touched the jade key without removing it. Watching. Waiting. The dish arrived with quiet ceremony. A halved cantaloupe sat cradled on a chilled plate, its flesh carved into a perfect bowl. Inside, a delicate arrangement of prawns, crab meat, and finely sliced vegetables rested in pale dressing, crowned with a wedge of lemon and a sprig of something green Finch could not immediately identify. It looked less like food than sculpture. "Compliments of the house," the waiter said. "I didn't order quickly enough to earn compliments," Finch replied. The waiter's expression did not change. "Enjoy your meal, sir." He departed. Finch studied the cantaloupe. If you wanted to poison someone discreetly in a place like this, you wouldn't tamper with the sauce or the seafood, too many variables, too many staff involved. You'd choose something prepared off-site. Something delivered whole. Something no one would question. Like fruit. He set his fork down. Across the room, a man in a charcoal suit folded his newspaper with precise movements and rose from his table. He did not look at Finch. Did not hurry. Simply walked toward the exit with the unhurried confidence of someone who had nowhere pressing to be. As he passed, he placed a folded napkin on Finch's table. The movement was so smooth it might have been accidental. Finch did not reach for it immediately. He waited until the man had disappeared into the corridor, until the rhythm of the room had settled again, until no one seemed to be watching. Then he unfolded the napkin beneath the edge of the table. Inside was a second note. This one handwritten in hurried strokes. "Do not eat it." Finch's eyes flicked to the cantaloupe. To the perfect, glistening surface. To the knife lying beside the plate. Before he could react, a shout cut through the room. "Sir!" A crash. Finch turned. The waiter who had served him lay on the marble floor, his tray overturned, silverware skittering like startled insects. His body convulsed once, twice, then went rigid. A woman screamed. The pianist stopped mid-phrase. Chairs scraped as people surged backward. Finch was already on his feet, moving fast, pushing through the gathering crowd. He dropped to one knee beside the fallen man, ignoring the maître d' shouting for space, for calm, for someone to call an ambulance. The waiter's skin had gone an unnatural grey. Foam gathered at the corners of his mouth. His pupils were blown wide, unresponsive. Poison. Fast-acting. Violent. Finch grabbed the man's wrist. No pulse. He looked up, scanning faces, exits, reactions. Too many people. Too much chaos. If the poison had been meant for Finch, then someone had just watched it fail. Which meant they were still here. A hand touched his shoulder. He turned sharply. An elderly woman stood behind him, elegant, composed, entirely out of place amid the panic. "Inspector Finch," she said quietly. He stared at her. "I'm sorry to introduce myself under such circumstances," she continued. "But we have very little time." "Who are you?" "A friend of someone who cannot be seen speaking to you." Her eyes flicked briefly toward the cantaloupe on Finch's table. "Do you have it?" she asked. Finch did not pretend to misunderstand. "Have what?" "The jade." Every muscle in his body tightened. "Why would you think that?" "Because," she said calmly, "men do not attempt to kill a police inspector during lunch unless he possesses something extremely valuable." "Fair point." "And if I did?" Finch said. "Then you are in far greater danger than you realize." Behind them, hotel staff attempted to usher guests toward the exits while security cordoned off the fallen waiter. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, police, ambulance, the machinery of order grinding slowly into motion. Finch stood. "Talk fast." The woman leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "The ledger was not merely a record," she said. "It was a map." "To what?" "To investments. Properties. Supply routes. Political donations. Everything required to reshape parts of London without public scrutiny." Finch felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "Redevelopment," he said. She inclined her head. And those plans cannot proceed while certain communities remain difficult to displace. Chinatown. Soho. Docklands. Places where people live too densely, own too little, resisted too stubbornly. Zhao Ming is not the architect, she continued. He is the demolition crew. Finch's gaze hardened. Who hired him? The woman stepped back. That, she said, is what you must discover. Security personnel were approaching now, scanning the room with professional suspicion. The woman's composure shifted subtly, not fear, but calculation. Leave the hotel, she said. Immediately. And you? We were never introduced. She turned, merging seamlessly into the thinning crowd, disappearing with astonishing efficiency for someone her age. Finch remained standing for a moment, the chaos of the room washing around him like surf around a rock. Then he looked down at the untouched cantaloupe. At the lemon wedge. At the knife. At the place where he would have taken his first bite. Someone had arranged this entire performance, the note, the dish, the warning, the death, to send a message. Not subtle. Not ambiguous. You are not invisible. You are not untouchable. And we can reach you anywhere. Finch picked up his coat. As he turned toward the exit, he slipped a few banknotes beneath the edge of the plate, an old reflex, absurd under the circumstances. Outside, the afternoon had darkened. Clouds gathered low over the river, pressing down on the city like a lid. Finch stepped onto the pavement and paused. Across the street, a black car idled at the curb, engine running. Its windows were dark, reflective, revealing nothing of the interior. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the car pulled smoothly into traffic and disappeared. Finch watched until it was gone. He reached into his pocket and closed his hand around the jade key. Right, he murmured to the empty air. Let's see who's really paying for lunch. He turned toward the city, toward the places where money moved quietly and decisions were made without minutes or witnesses. Behind him, sirens grew louder. Ahead of him, London stretched wide and indifferent, a maze of power, ambition, and secrets that suddenly felt much larger than any ledger. Excellent call, clarity beats cleverness in Noir. We'll keep the conspiracy focused on the Jade arc and let the Savoy case expand the story forward instead of backward. So episode 15 becomes the moment Finch realizes. Chinatown was not the center. It was only the doorway. Let's move deeper into the polished, dangerous world behind it. Episode 15, The Savoy Protocol. Part 2. The Savoy after an incident is a study in controlled panic. No sirens. No shouting. No uniforms flooding marble floors. The machinery of discretion engaged instantly, quietly, efficiently, like a well-rehearsed stage change between acts. Detective Inspector Alistair Finch stood near the entrance to the Thames foyer while a manager in immaculate morning dress spoke in hushed tones to a cluster of guests who had been gently shepherded away from the collapsed waiter. The orchestra had stopped mid-number. Now only the soft clink of glassware being cleared broke the silence. The body had already been removed. Only a faint damp outline on the carpet remained, like a shadow that had lost its owner. Inspector. Finch turned. A uniformed officer approached, holding a small evidence envelope. Found in the man's jacket pocket. Finch opened it carefully. Inside lay a folded card, heavy cream stock, embossed but unmarked. No handwriting. No message. Except for a tiny symbol printed in jade green ink. A circle intersected by a vertical line. The same mark he had seen on documents in Chinatown. The same mark that had appeared on the jade key recovered from Ju's belongings. Finch closed the envelope. Name of the deceased? Arthur Mills. Senior waiter. 20 years service. Finch glanced toward the doorway that led to the kitchens. Family. Wife and daughter. South London. He nodded once. A man who had done everything right. Worked hard. Stayed invisible. Served others comfort for 2 decades. Dead on the carpet of a hotel where no one important was meant to die. Cause? Finch asked. Doctor on scene suspects poison. Rapid onset. Finch's gaze drifted to the table where his lunch still sat untouched, the Cantaloupe Half glistening under the chandelier, prawns arranged with surgical precision, lemon wedge perched like an afterthought. Beauty arranged for consumption. Get it bagged, he said. The Savoy's head chef was furious. Not frightened. Not grieving. Furious. This is an outrage, he snapped, pacing the stainless steel corridor outside the main kitchen. Our produce is inspected. Our staff is trained. Nothing leaves this kitchen without supervision. Finch leaned against the wall, unimpressed. I'm not accusing your kitchen, chef. Someone is. Someone murdered one of your employees, Finch said calmly. I'm trying to understand how. The chef stopped pacing. We prepare the cantaloupe fresh each morning, he said stiffly. Whole fruit delivered daily from our supplier. Cut on site. Filled immediately before service. Supplier. Thames Produce Importers. Finch filed the name away. Anyone handled that particular melon before it reached the kitchen? Only the porter who unloaded the crates. Name. Douglas Perry. He's outside. Finch stepped into the service yard. Douglas Perry was a large man with the resigned posture of someone accustomed to physical labor and little respect. He removed his cap nervously when Finch approached. Inspector. I didn't do anything. I know, Finch said. Tell me about the delivery. Same as always. Lorry came at 6. Crate sealed. I carried them in. Anyone else near them? Perry hesitated. Well, there was a bloke asking for directions. Said he was looking for the river entrance. What did he look like? Nothing special. Dark coat. Hat pulled low. Accent. Could have been local. Didn't say much. Did he touch the crates? I turned away for a second to answer him, suppose he could have. Finch felt the pattern solidifying. Injection into the fruit before it entered the kitchen. Elegant. Simple. Difficult to trace. Did you see him leave? No, sir. Of course not. People like that never lingered. An hour later Finch sat in a quiet corner of the hotel's private lounge, the noise of the foyer sealed away behind thick doors. A single constable guarded the entrance. Outside, traffic moved along the Strand as if nothing had happened. On the table before Finch lay the jade-marked card. A preliminary toxicology report. Notes on the produce supplier. A list of guests present during lunch service. He studied the guest list carefully. Diplomats. Industrialists. A theatre producer. 2 members of Parliament. A shipping executive whose name Finch recognized from previous investigations, always peripheral, never central, like a man who preferred to orbit power rather than hold it. One name had been circled by the hotel manager. Sir Malcolm Hargreaves. Property developer. Philanthropist. Knighted for services to urban renewal. Finch exhaled smoke slowly. Urban renewal. The polite term for reshaping neighborhoods according to someone else's priorities. A knock came at the door. Come in. A man in an expensive suit entered, silver hair, precise posture, the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being listened to. Inspector Finch. I'm Sir Malcolm Hargreaves. I understand you wish to speak with me. Finch gestured to the chair opposite. I understand you were seated 2 tables from the incident. Quite distressing, Hargreaves said smoothly. Terrible for the poor fellow's family. But not for you. Hargreaves smiled faintly. I assure you, Inspector, I take no pleasure in tragedy. Did you notice anything unusual before the waiter collapsed? Nothing whatsoever. Did you order fruit? No. Finch tapped the file lightly. Are you acquainted with Thames Produce Importers? Can't say that I am. The answer came too quickly. Finch watched him for several seconds without speaking. Powerful men were rarely accustomed to silence. It made them uneasy. Hargreaves cleared his throat. if there's nothing further. You're redeveloping several riverfront properties, Finch said casually. Hargreaves paused. Public information. Some of those properties were previously owned by Chinese business interests. London is an international city, Inspector. Some were also linked to individuals currently under investigation. Hargreaves' smile thinned. I fail to see what this has to do with a waiter's unfortunate demise. Finch leaned forward slightly. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Their eyes met. For the first time, something colder than politeness flickered behind Hargreaves' composure, not fear, not guilt, but calculation. Then it was gone. If you require documentation, my office will cooperate fully, he said, rising. Good day, Inspector. Finch watched him leave. Men like Hargreaves did not get their hands dirty. They arranged for others to do it. Late afternoon found Finch standing alone on the Savoy's riverside terrace. The Thames moved below like a strip of tarnished metal, reflecting the low winter sun. Behind him, laughter drifted from a private function, champagne glasses, polite applause, the sound of wealth pretending the world was orderly. He lit another cigarette. The jade symbol. The poisoned fruit. The silent stranger in the service yard. The developer who knew more than he admitted. None of it pointed to impulsive violence. It pointed to orchestration. Footsteps approached. Finch did not turn. You shouldn't eat that, said a quiet voice. He looked down. Someone had placed another Cantaloupe Half on the terrace table beside him, identical to the one he had ordered earlier, but untouched. No one else was nearby. Finch scanned the area. Empty. On the plate lay a small folded paper. He opened it. 3 words, typed neatly. Stop digging now. Below them, the jade symbol again. Finch crushed the paper in his fist. Then, very deliberately, he picked up the fork, cut into the fruit, and took a bite. The melon was sweet. Perfectly ripe. Completely harmless. He swallowed. Somewhere behind him, unseen, someone had just learned something important about Detective Inspector Alistair Finch. He did not scare easily. Finch set the fork down, wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, and looked out at the river. Your move, he murmured. The Thames flowed on, indifferent. But in the windows of the Savoy behind him, the late sun reflected like rows of watching eyes. Episode 15, The Savoy Protocol. Part 3. Night fell over the Strand like a curtain drawn by steady hands. Detective Inspector Alistair Finch did not go home. Instead, he stood across the street from a narrow office block near Blackfriars, studying the brass plate beside the door. Thames Produce Importers Limited. The lettering was modest. Respectable. The sort of company name that promised invoices and refrigerated lorries, not poison. A single light burned on the 2nd floor. Finch checked his watch. 8:10. Respectable businesses kept respectable hours. He crossed the street. The receptionist was gone. The hallway smelled faintly of paper and citrus polish. Finch mounted the stairs without hurry and knocked once before opening the frosted glass door. Inside, a man in shirt sleeves looked up from a ledger book. He was younger than Finch expected, early 30s, sharp-featured, hair combed with mathematical precision. Yes, the man said. We're closed. Detective Inspector Finch. The man's eyes flicked briefly to Finch's coat, then to the warrant card, then back to Finch's face. I'm Daniel Rowe. Managing Director. Busy night? Finch asked. Always is in Produce. Finch stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. I'd like to discuss your cantaloupes. Rowe's expression did not change. We supply half the hotels in central London. Today you supplied the Savoy. Yes. One of your deliveries may have been tampered with. Rowe leaned back slowly. That sounds like a hotel security issue. Perhaps. Finch moved to the window and looked out over the darkened rooftops. Who has access to your shipments between dock and kitchen? Our drivers. Our warehouse staff. Anyone else? No. Finch turned. You're certain? Quite. Because a man died this afternoon after serving fruit from one of your crates. Ro's fingers tightened slightly on the ledger pen, almost imperceptible, but Finch saw it. I'm sorry to hear that, Ro said carefully. But we cannot control what happens after delivery. Someone may have controlled what happened before delivery. Ro gave a thin smile. Inspector, with respect, Thames Produce is a legitimate company. Our investors are well known. Including. Ro hesitated, half a second too long. A consortium. Names. Private stakeholders. Finch stepped closer to the desk. Private stakeholders don't usually appear in homicide inquiries. Ro met his gaze evenly. They will not appreciate implication. I'm not implying, Finch said quietly. I'm asking. Silence stretched between them. Then Ro closed the ledger and folded his hands. Inspector, I advise you to be careful where you point your torch. Some places are darker than you expect. Finch's eyes narrowed. That a warning? A courtesy? Finch held his gaze another beat, then turned and left without another word. Behind him, the office light snapped off. It was nearly midnight when Finch's phone rang in his flat. He had just removed his coat when the shrill tone cut through the quiet. He let it ring once more before answering. Finch. Silence. Then breathing. Not the frightened, shallow breathing of a prank caller. Measured. Controlled. You were not meant to eat it, the voice said. Low. Male. Distorted slightly, as if cupped by a hand. I wasn't meant to die either, Finch replied evenly. A faint exhale of amusement. The man who died was not the target. Finch's pulse slowed. Who was? You were never the target, the voice continued. You were the witness. A cold thread tightened along Finch's spine. To what? To discipline. The word hung in the air. Finch said nothing. The waiter served more than fruit, the voice said. He served information. About. He spoke too freely. About certain guests. Certain meetings. Finch thought of Sir Malcolm Hargreaves. Of the jade symbol. Of the quiet elegance of the Savoy. You killed him for talking, Finch said. We corrected a vulnerability. And the Cantaloupe? A stage. The meaning settled heavily. The fruit had not been poisoned for Finch. It had been displayed for him. A performance. A warning disguised as assassination. You wanted me there, Finch said. Yes. To see what happens. To understand scale. Finch leaned against the wall, eyes unfocused. And if I don't? A pause. You will. The line went dead. Finch replaced the receiver slowly. He stood in the dim light of his flat for a long moment, the city's distant traffic humming beyond the windows. Not random. Not reactive. Strategic. They had orchestrated a killing in one of London's most visible hotels not to eliminate him, but to demonstrate reach. The Savoy was not neutral ground. It was theirs. The next morning brought pressure. Chief Superintendent Mallory summoned Finch before 9. Mallory's office smelled of pipe tobacco and impatience. I'm told you're making inquiries into a well-respected import company, Mallory said without preamble. I am. Why? Because their produce was used to deliver poison. The Savoy is handling the matter internally. It's a homicide. Mallory removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Finch? Thames Produce is connected to individuals who contribute substantially to civic initiatives. Urban renewal. Finch asked dryly. Mallory's eyes hardened. You will pursue the immediate facts of the waiter's death. Nothing broader. Sir. That is an instruction. Silence. Finch held his superior's gaze. Understood, he said finally. But he did not mean it. He found Liang Wei Chen that afternoon in the back room of his Chinatown restaurant, the air thick with ginger and steam. Chen did not look surprised to see him. You ate? Chen asked mildly. Yes. And lived? For now. Chen poured tea into 2 small cups. The Savoy is not a place where accidents happen, he said. Apparently not. Chen studied him carefully. You have stepped into a different current, Inspector. So it would seem. Chen leaned back. In Chinatown, power is negotiated openly. Respect. Territory. Balance. And at the Savoy. Chen's expression cooled. At the Savoy, power smiles. Finch placed the jade-marked card on the table. Chen's eyes flicked to it, and something like recognition passed across his face. You've seen it before, Finch said. Chen hesitated. Yes. Where? In documents. Years ago. Connected to Jiaoming. Chen shook his head slowly. No. Finch felt the shift before Chen spoke the next words. Connected to men Jiaoming answers to. The room seemed to narrow. I thought Jiao was consolidating control, Finch said. He is, Chen replied. But not for himself. Then for who? Chen's gaze held steady. For those who do not appear in police files. The twist came that evening. Forensic results confirmed the poison had not been injected into Finch's cantaloupe. It had been injected into only one melon in the crate. One destined, by placement and timing, for a specific table. Arthur Mills had carried it there by routine, unaware he was transporting his own death. Finch studied the seating chart again. The poisoned melon had been delivered not to Finch's table, but to Sir Malcolm Hargreaves. The waiter had mistakenly swapped plates at the last moment. The poison was meant for Hargreaves. Finch felt the implications ripple outward. This was not a demonstration. It was an attempted execution. And someone had tried, and failed, to kill one of London's most powerful developers. Which meant 2 possibilities. Either Hargreaves was not part of the inner circle, or someone inside it had decided he was expendable. Finch looked out over the river from the embankment as dusk settled once more over London. The Savoy lights glowed in the distance, warm, inviting, immaculate. But beneath the chandeliers and silver service, alliances were fracturing. Someone had tried to remove Sir Malcolm Hargreaves. And they had nearly succeeded. Finch lit a cigarette. Now, he murmured, watching smoke curl into the cold air, that's interesting. Because if the conspiracy was beginning to turn on itself, then perhaps it could bleed. Episode 15, The Savoy Protocol. Part 4. Rain returned to London with the quiet persistence of a creditor. By evening the pavements along the Strand shone like black glass, reflecting neon, brake lights, and the golden facade of the Savoy as if the city were trying to admire itself while pretending nothing unpleasant had occurred there only a day before. Detective Inspector Alistair Finch stood beneath the awning of a tobacconist opposite the hotel, collar turned up, cigarette burning untouched between his fingers. He had not made an appointment. Men like Sir Malcolm Hargreaves did not respond well to official channels when those channels brought inconvenient truths. Surprise was more effective. Across the street, chauffeurs waited beside polished motorcars, their silhouettes rigid against the rain. Guests drifted in and out beneath umbrellas, laughter floating briefly before dissolving into the wet air. A world insulated from consequence. Finch crossed the street. Sir Malcolm Hargreaves was in the American bar, seated alone at a corner table with a glass of something amber and expensive. The room glowed with warm light, brass fittings, and the low murmur of cultivated voices. Hargreaves looked up as Finch approached, surprise registering only as a slight pause in the motion of lifting his glass. "Inspector." "Sir Malcolm." Finch sat without invitation. "You're not easy to reach," he said. "I prefer not to be," Hargreaves replied calmly. "What can I do for you?" Finch studied him, immaculate suit, composed posture, the relaxed confidence of a man accustomed to controlling outcomes. "You were meant to die yesterday." Hargreaves did not flinch. But his hand stopped moving. "I beg your pardon." "The poisoned fruit," Finch said quietly. "It was intended for your table." Silence pooled between them, thick and heavy. Hargreaves set his glass down with precise care. That is a very serious claim. It's also true. For the first time, something unguarded surfaced in Hargreaves' eyes, not fear exactly, but the abrupt recalculation of a man whose assumptions had just been overturned. "Why tell me?" he asked. "Because you need to decide whether you're a victim or part of the problem." A muscle moved in Hargreaves' jaw. "I assure you, Inspector, I have no enemies who would resort to such theatrics." "Everyone has enemies," Finch said. "Especially men who reshape cities." Hargreaves leaned back, studying him now with a new intensity. "You believe this is connected to my business dealings?" "I believe someone with significant resources attempted to kill you in one of the most visible hotels in London," Finch replied. "That narrows the field." Hargreaves' fingers tapped the table once. "Hypothetically," he said, "if what you say were true, what would you expect me to do? Tell me who you've angered." A long pause. Then Hargreaves smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Inspector, you assume I am the sort of man who becomes angry at all." "Everyone becomes inconvenient eventually," Finch said. The smile faded. "Perhaps," Hargreaves said softly. "Or perhaps I've recently declined to cooperate with certain proposals." Finch's attention sharpened. "What proposals?" Hargreaves looked around the bar, as if weighing how much could safely be said even here. "Investment opportunities," he said at last. "Infrastructure projects. International partnerships. Chinese?" Finch asked. Hargreaves' gaze snapped back to him. "You've been busy. Have you met Zhao Ming?" Finch pressed. "No." "His associates?" "No." Finch leaned forward slightly. "Then someone representing them?" Silence. Rain rattled softly against the windows. Hargreaves exhaled. "Some months ago," he said carefully, "an intermediary approached my office regarding participation in a redevelopment consortium. And the terms were unusual." "In what way?" "No oversight. No public disclosure. Guaranteed approval at municipal levels." Finch felt the pieces shifting. "Too good to be true." "Precisely." "And you refused." "I deferred," Hargreaves corrected. "Politely." Finch held his gaze. "And now someone tried to kill you." Hargreaves picked up his glass but did not drink. "Inspector, if what you're suggesting is accurate, then the matter is far beyond property disputes." "Yes," Finch said quietly. "It is." They left the bar together by a discreet side entrance, stepping into the rain-washed darkness along the embankment. For a moment they stood side by side without speaking, watching the Thames slide past under the lamps. "You understand," Hargreaves said at last, "that if I acknowledge any of this publicly, markets would react. Projects would stall. Investors would panic." "People are already dying," Finch said. Hargreaves' voice dropped. "You assume the police can protect me?" "No," Finch replied. "I assume they can't." That earned him a sharp look. "Then why tell me?" "Because if you're going to be killed," Finch said, "I'd rather it not happen without warning." A faint, humorless laugh escaped Hargreaves. "You are an unusual policeman, Inspector." "So I'm told." They began walking toward the line of waiting cars. Halfway there, Finch felt it, a prickle at the back of his neck, the subtle awareness of attention. He slowed. "Don't look," he murmured. Hargreaves stiffened slightly. "What is it?" "Someone's watching." Across the street, a figure stood beneath a bus shelter, face obscured by shadow and rain. Not moving. Not pretending to wait. Just observing. Finch's pulse steadied. He had seen that posture before. Professional. "Get in your car," Finch said quietly. "Leave immediately. No stops." "And you?" "I'll follow." Hargreaves opened his mouth to protest, then thought better of it. The car door shut. The engine started. The vehicle pulled into traffic and disappeared into the wet glow of taillights. Finch turned back toward the bus shelter. The figure was gone. The second attempt came minutes later. Not at Hargreaves. At Finch. He heard the motorcycle before he saw it, engine rising suddenly from the background hum of traffic, accelerating hard along the embankment road. Instinct moved him before thought did. He stepped sideways just as the bike roared past, something metallic flashing in the rider's hand. A sharp crack split the air. The stone parapet behind Finch exploded in a spray of chips. Gunfire. The motorcycle did not slow. It vanished into traffic, swallowed by the city's night pulse. Finch pressed himself against the wall, breath controlled, eyes scanning for a second attacker. None came. After a moment he straightened, brushing dust from his coat as if he had merely stumbled. A warning shot. Not meant to kill. Meant to remind. He looked down at the shattered stone. The bullet had struck exactly where his chest had been seconds earlier. Professional aim. Professional restraint. Message received, he muttered. Back in his flat, Finch spread the case materials across his table, photographs, reports, names, the jade-marked card, notes from Chen. Patterns emerged like faint writing under heat. Jiaoming. The jade symbol. Thames Produce. The consortium. Hargreaves' refusal. The waiter's death. The staged warning. The assassination attempt. Not chaos. Pressure applied from multiple directions to achieve a single outcome. Compliance. Finch poured himself a measure of whiskey and did not drink it. Instead, he stared at the amber liquid as if answers might rise from its depths. Someone wanted control of London's future, its land, its infrastructure, its supply chains. And they were willing to kill anyone who resisted. Even their own partners. Even police officers. A soft knock sounded at his door. Finch froze. No one visited him unannounced at this hour. He moved silently to the wall beside the door, hand slipping into his coat pocket. Another knock. Inspector, a familiar voice called quietly. It is Chen. Finch opened the door a fraction. Liang Wei Chen stood in the hallway, rain-dark coat, expression grave. I would not come unless it was urgent, Chen said. Finch opened the door wider. Chen stepped inside and closed it behind him. They have accelerated, he said without preamble. Why? Chen met his eyes. Because someone above them has given permission. A chill passed through the room. Above Jiaoming? Finch asked. Chen nodded. There is a name, he said softly. One spoken only rarely. Finch leaned forward. What name? Chen hesitated, as if even saying it might summon attention. The architect. The word settled heavily in the air. Not a businessman. Not a gang leader. A planner. Someone designing the structure within which everyone else moved. Finch finally lifted the whiskey and took a slow sip. Good, he said quietly. Chen blinked. You are not alarmed. I am, Finch replied. But now I know what we're looking for. Outside, rain continued to fall, washing the city clean of visible traces. Inside, the investigation had just crossed a threshold. Because if there was an architect, then the Savoy, the Jade Network, the poisoned fruit, the killings. They were all part of a single design. And Detective Inspector Alistair Finch had just stepped directly into its blueprint. Episode 15, The Savoy Protocol. Part 5. London did not sleep, but it did grow quieter, the way a predator grows still before it moves. By 2 in the morning, the city felt hollowed out. Traffic thinned to the occasional taxi. Neon flickered over empty pavements. Somewhere far off, a siren wailed briefly and was swallowed by distance. Inside Finch's flat, the air had grown stale with cigarette smoke and tension. Liang Wei Chen had not sat down. He stood near the window, looking not at the street below but at the reflections in the glass, the interior of the room behind him. It was the posture of a man who had learned to watch for danger from both directions. You do not understand, Chen said quietly. When the architect moves openly, it means the preparation phase is over. Finch poured fresh tea instead of whiskey this time. His hands were steady. Then we stop the next phase. Chen shook his head. It is not a plan that can simply be stopped. It is a structure already built. Finch handed him a cup. Every structure has foundations, he said. Remove those, the rest collapses. Chen did not take the tea. Instead, he reached into his coat and produced something wrapped in oilcloth. I hope never to show you this, he said. He set it on the table and unwrapped it carefully. Inside lay a thin folder bound with faded green cord. The cover bore the jade symbol. But beneath it, stamped faintly in English, Savoy Protocol, Phase 3. Finch's pulse did not quicken outwardly, but something inside him tightened like wire. Where did you get this? Years ago, Chen said. Before I left that world. You kept it. I kept it because one day someone would need to understand. Finch untied the cord. Inside were typed pages, organizational charts, property maps, shipping routes, financial conduits. Not criminal scribbles. Corporate precision. Citywide precision. He flipped to a diagram of central London. Key sites circled in jade ink. The Savoy. Blackfriars Transport Hub. Several riverfront developments. Telecommunications exchanges. Food distribution depots. Infrastructure. Not territory. Control points. They're not taking over neighborhoods, Finch murmured. They're taking over the systems that make neighborhoods function. Chen nodded. Supply, transport, communication, finance. Once those are controlled, the city obeys whether it wishes to or not. Finch turned another page. A timeline. Most entries were marked complete. Only one remained blank. Phase 4, or activation. What does activation mean? Finch asked. Chen's voice was very quiet. It means they no longer need permission. A hard knock at the door shattered the stillness. Both men froze. Not tentative. Not cautious. Authority. Finch moved to the door, hand near his pocket. Police, a voice called. Open up. Finch frowned. He had not requested assistance. He opened the door a fraction. Two uniformed officers stood outside, unfamiliar faces, expressions neutral. Inspector Finch, one asked. Yes. You're required at headquarters immediately. Chief Superintendent's orders. At this hour. Urgent matter. Finch studied them. Something was wrong. Uniforms correct. Tone correct. But their eyes did not move like policemen's eyes. Too fixed. Too controlled. He smiled faintly. Tell Mallory I'll be there in the morning. That is not acceptable. The second officer shifted slightly, just enough to reveal the outline of something beneath his coat that was not standard issue. Finch's smile vanished. I see, he said quietly. Before either man could react, he slammed the door shut and threw the bolt. Footsteps outside. A muttered curse. Then silence. Chen exhaled slowly. They know where you live. They've known for some time, Finch said. Tonight they decided to use it. A metallic sound came from the hallway, the subtle scrape of something being inserted into the lock. Finch moved instantly. Back exit, he said. They slipped down the rear stairwell and into a narrow alley slick with rainwater and refuse. The city's glow barely reached this deep between buildings. Chen pulled his coat tight. Where now? Finch did not hesitate. We go to the one place they won't expect. The Savoy was hosting a gala. Music spilled onto the street, bright and buoyant, a defiant assertion that wealth and culture remained intact regardless of whatever shadows moved beyond the lights. Finch and Chen entered through the side entrance, blending with catering staff carrying trays and crates. Inside, chandeliers blazed. Champagne flowed. Laughter rose and fell like the tide. Finch scanned the room. If phase 4 is activation, he murmured, it happens where maximum leverage exists. Chen's eyes followed his. At the far end of the ballroom stood a raised dais. On it, Sir Malcolm Hargreaves was speaking into a microphone, a banner behind him announcing a new international redevelopment initiative along the Thames. Finch felt a cold clarity settle over him. "This isn't a party," he said. "It's a launch." Chen's expression darkened. "And if Hargreaves refused them?" "They replace him," Finch finished. On the edge of the crowd, a waiter moved past carrying a tray of champagne flutes. Finch grabbed one, not to drink, but to smell. Almond. Faint. Almost imperceptible. Cyanide. His eyes snapped up. "Don't drink anything," he said sharply. Chen nodded, already alert. Across the room, guests raised glasses as Hargreaves concluded his speech. "To a new London," Hargreaves said, smiling broadly. Glasses lifted. Finch moved. He shoved through the crowd, knocking arms aside, voices rising in protest. "Sir Malcolm," he shouted. Hargreaves looked up, startled. Too late. A woman beside him swayed, glass slipping from her hand, shattering on the dais. Another man collapsed backward into the podium. Then another. Screams erupted. Panic spread like fire. Finch reached the stage just as Hargreaves staggered, confusion replacing composure. "Don't swallow," Finch snapped, grabbing his wrist. "Spit it out." Hargreaves coughed violently, dropping his glass, retching onto the polished wood. Around them, guests were collapsing, choking, convulsing. Not targeted. Mass casualty. Chen climbed onto the stage beside Finch. "This is activation," he said grimly. Security rushed forward, unsure whether to contain or flee. Finch looked out over the chaos, dozens poisoned in seconds, emergency services not yet alerted, exits clogged with terrified bodies. Not assassination. Demonstration. Proof that the architect could strike at the elite heart of London without warning. Sir Malcolm clung to the podium, pale and shaking. "Why?" he gasped. Finch met his eyes. "Because you weren't important anymore." Minutes later, sirens wailed outside, blue lights flashing through the tall windows like lightning. Finch stood apart from the paramedics, watching stretchers roll past. Some victims would live. Some would not. Chen approached quietly. "You have seen their power now," he said. "What will you do?" Finch lit a cigarette with steady hands. "I find the architect," he said. "And I end this." Chen studied him. "You speak as if it is possible." Finch exhaled smoke into the flashing light. "Everything is possible," he said quietly, "once you stop playing by their rules." Across the street, a lone figure stood in the shadow of a column, observing the chaos with calm detachment. Finch's gaze locked onto him instinctively. Even at a distance, something about the posture radiated authority, not nervous, not hurried, not concerned. Satisfied. The figure inclined his head slightly, as if acknowledging Finch personally. Then turned and walked away into the darkness. Finch did not pursue. Not yet. Because he finally understood. This had never been about killing him. It had been about inviting him. Episode 15, The Savoy Protocol. Part 6. The aftermath of the Savoy Gala still clung to Finch like wet smoke. He stood on the grand staircase leading to the Strand, surveying the chaos through the broken opulence of chandeliers and gilt-framed mirrors. Medics moved swiftly through the ballroom, attending to the poisoned guests. Some were unconscious, others coughing violently. The faint scent of spilled champagne mixed with antiseptic and cigarette smoke, a perverse perfume of panic. Chen arrived at Finch's side, face pale but composed. "Inspector," he said, "the architect is not done. This was only the demonstration." Finch nodded. "I know. But we've learned everything we need to know about their reach." He took out his notebook, flipping to the pages he had scribbled with connections: Thames Produce, Hargreaves, the Consortium, the Savoy, and now Phase 4. Patterns emerged like constellations, a network of influence, financial control, and orchestrated fear. And at the center, the architect. "We can't confront them blindly," Chen said. "They have eyes everywhere. No, Finch admitted. But we can force a choice. He moved quickly to the back exit, Chen close behind. On the steps outside, the rain had resumed, washing the city streets in reflective neon. London at night, after chaos, looked deceptively calm, a mirror hiding jagged teeth. Finch led Chen to a waiting car, inconspicuous, dark, with driver ready. As they drove, Finch laid out the plan. We make it personal. The architect thinks in terms of leverage, control. We use their own strategy against them. Chen leaned back. You mean? Exposing a vulnerability. Someone they care about. Someone they didn't expect us to protect. Hargreaves is useful, but expendable. We'll need someone closer to the core. Chen's gaze flicked to Finch. You. I know, Finch said. They underestimate me because I'm a detective. I follow clues, not money. They forget we can see patterns they consider invisible. The next morning, Finch returned to Thames Produce's warehouse. The night's events had left him with no illusions. He was walking into danger, but the path was now visible. Inside, the air was humid with the scent of produce, cantaloupe, citrus, and the faint metallic trace of blood from yesterday's delivery that had been tested and removed. Finch moved silently, scanning the shelves and crates. Then he saw him. A man, mid-40s, sharp eyes, conservative suit, the image of respectability. But Finch knew better. Mr. Alden, Finch said, using the name from his prior inquiries. I believe you are the architect. The man's lips curved into a small smile. Detective Inspector Finch. You are as perceptive as they said. You staged the Savoy attack to test your control. You misjudged me. Finch's voice was calm, measured. Alden gestured toward the crates. I needed to understand who would interfere. The networks, the loyalty, the ability to act without hesitation. You underestimated me, Finch repeated. Alden's smile widened, but his eyes betrayed tension. And now? Now, Finch said, you face exposure. Public, financial, criminal. Your carefully constructed web is not invisible anymore. The confrontation escalated quickly. Alden drew a pistol from inside his coat. Finch reacted instinctively, ducking behind a stack of crates as Chen leapt forward. A single shot rang out. Finch felt the wind from it graze his shoulder. Not serious, the warning. You will not leave this room alive, Alden hissed. Possibly, Finch replied. But you won't either. Finch moved silently, calculating. He had studied Alden for hours, gestures, posture, reactions. Chen acted as a secondary, drawing Alden's attention. And then, the trick Finch had prepared, a spill of produce across the floor. Slippery, unassuming. Finch provoked a sudden lunge. Alden stepped forward, slipped, and the gun discharged into the crate beside him, embedding a melon in the wood. Finch tackled him to the ground. The struggle was brief. Chen joined, pinning Alden's arms. Finch secured the gun. You lost control, Finch said. And that's your undoing. By dawn, the authorities had arrived. Finch handed Alden over to officers, evidence collected meticulously, the Savoy poisoning plot, financial records, communications, the jade-marked files. Sir Malcolm Hargreaves had survived thanks to Finch's intervention, shaken but alive. Chen lingered behind, quietly observing Finch. You risked yourself, Chen said. Alone. I risk myself every day, Finch replied. But someone must do it. Someone has to see the patterns no one else sees. Chen's gaze softened. And London will continue to move in ways you may never witness. But tonight, you stopped a disaster. Finch allowed himself a faint smile. For now. Back at his flat, Finch prepared a simple meal. Minimalist. Classic. The act of cooking, slicing vegetables, poaching eggs, stirring sauces, grounded him. He laid out the seafood salad in a Cantaloupe Half, precisely as he had seen at the Savoy. He ate slowly, deliberately, savoring the taste and the quiet. The city moved beyond his window, unaware of the chaos it had narrowly avoided. A cigarette glowed faintly on the ashtray. The phone lay silent. The jade-marked card was locked away. The chaos had subsided, temporarily. Finch leaned back, contemplating the city. He had unraveled one conspiracy. But he knew there would be others. Networks of power, ambition, and manipulation stretched far beyond a single hotel, a single consortium. And somewhere, out of sight, new players were watching. Waiting. Calculating. He lit another cigarette. London was alive, indifferent, dangerous. And Detective Inspector Alistair Finch would be ready.